Hey guys, I'm Jeremy, and today I thought I'd tell you about my story of how I was hit by a car on my bike in Kyrgyzstan. And that was actually not the worst part of the whole thing. So this is a while ago. This is back in 2008. This was my second part of my worldwide bike trip. And in the first section, if you've seen some of my other videos, you'll know I was 4 months into my trip and I got hit by a SUV in China. I broke my femur, and I already made a video about that last year. So you can check that out if you're interested in that one too. And so I had gone through, on this section, through Tibet, Nepal, India, Pakistan. I was in Xinjiang, China, and then I came into Kyrgyzstan. So Kyrgyzstan's in Central Asia, okay? To the southeast, as I mentioned, is China, and then above there is Kazakhstan and Russia, and to the east is Mongolia, and then to the west would be Tajikistan and Uzbekistan and stuff like that. So it's definitely an awesome country. I mean, I knew I wanted to go through there because any country with huge mountains is totally what I'm looking for. So I knew it would be awesome in that regard. It's kind of like Colorado or Sichuan, where I was in China, with, you know, peaks that are like 10,000 to 14,000 feet on average, I guess. And actually the highest mountain in the Far East is about 24,400 feet or something. So they've definitely got some awesome mountains. So if you're into hiking and backpacking and stuff, it's a great place to go. So anyway, I was in the country for about 2 weeks at that point. I'd come up through Xinjiang, through Osh, and I think it was only a couple of 100 miles to Bishkek, which is the capital. And everything in general is going pretty good. You know, the roads and stuff there, they don't have like crazy traffic. You know, they don't have like really big 4-lane highways or anything. It's a very rural country, not a high population or anything like that. A lot of people are just taking horses around. You kind of get a feel like, I haven't been to Mongolia, but it kind of feels like that kind of thing, where like a lot of nomadic people living in yurts and, you know, riding horses, and quite a bit of drinking. Their history and culture is kind of tied a little bit more to Russia in some ways, because it was part of the Soviet Union. So yeah, there's a lot of vodka drinking and stuff like that. So quite a few drunk people, even in the very early morning hours. So I was pretty concerned about this area as far as there, and like Kazakhstan, I knew there was quite a lot of drinking, and which obviously isn't good for drinking and driving if you're on the road. My case didn't involve this, luckily. So I had heard actually of a few people getting hit by cars in Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan over the years, so it's definitely a little concerning. The other thing you kind of notice in this area, compared to like China or Southeast Asia and some other places, I would say it's maybe a little bit more dangerous in some ways. Obviously, I mentioned the drinking thing. Like for instance, if I go into China or Thailand into some bars at night, you could get into a fight. It's possible, but it's not like it happens all the time. You know, I did have another interesting story about that too in my playlist. But generally, it's pretty safe. There, you know, up in Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, a lot of those guys are professional wrestlers and weightlifters. And I'll tell you, man, you go into a club or something and they're giving you the crooked eye. And I mean, these guys seem like no joke. And besides the possibility of getting beat up like in bars and things like that, or hit by a car, you also have to be concerned about crooked cops, because it was part of the Soviet Union, which maybe that's not the entire reason, but that could be part of it. A lot of the cops, and not just cops, but people will dress up like cops and try to get your passport or extort you for money. I heard quite a few stories around the time of that. And I had my own experience actually in Kazakhstan, where basically a drunk cop pulled up in like a 2-door car, like his private car, and was like, passport, and he's just trashed and like following me around trying to get my passport from me. And I'm like, no dude, you're trashed, like what are you gonna do? You know, it's like, I luckily got into a hotel and the lady at the hotel talked to him and the guy finally left. But anyway, so there could be some stuff like that I've heard over the years. Now that was 14 years ago, I'm not sure if that's still happening, but just keep that in mind if you're up in that area. I heard of another guy, or I think I personally met a guy who was at Issyk-Kul, the big lake there in the east of the country, and pretty sure he got like totally beat up and like knocked out, and like almost they took all his clothes. Like pretty bad story. I heard of a couple things like that, even in broad daylight. So, but generally speaking, I think it's pretty safe. So anyway, I had just gone over Karabel Pass. I think that's a couple 100 kilometers or so from Bishkek. So, with some passes, usually kind of have some switchbacks, and then once you get towards the top, it kind of flattens out and down. And I think with this one, there wasn't even really any like big switchbacks. It was actually just all kind of like a slow up and then down. So the area I was in was actually basically totally flat. So any of the cars could see me for like a few kilometers. And so I wasn't even too concerned about the traffic and things because, I mean, people could see you. Now, of course, you have to defensively drive. You can't just, go out in the street and not look, of course. But when people have that much visibility, you're not as concerned as like a blind corner when someone comes around a tight turn or something like that, or in a city or whatever. And so it was funny because I had stopped and a few guys wanted to take a photo with me, because I already finished eating or whatever. I think I had lunch or maybe just some bread and tea. And they're like, no, come back, because I was getting on my bike to leave, and they wanted me to come back to get this photo with them, which, of course, is a difference in time of, 2 minutes that maybe that accident wouldn't have happened if those guys didn't bug me about that. Kind of a pet peeve over the years. I mean, not really a big deal, but in every country, people are always trying to get photos of you and stuff. And so, yeah, I actually went up to the road, and, there's no one out there I could see for miles, and it's like, I did have my headphones in. And then, I looked both ways, and I didn't directly cross the road like that. I'm just kind of going in the direction I'm going. I think at that point it might have even been slightly downhill. And, as I'm going diagonally across, not thinking too much, I could see there was a car way up ahead of me, and there was nothing behind me. But as I was into the right lane, almost to the shoulder, but still probably in the middle of the road, I looked back and I saw, a small white car hauling ass, and I don't know why, you could see a big guy up on, if you see something in the road or even a horse or whatever, your first thing is like, at least take your pedal off the gas, slow down a bit. Obviously the guy wasn't thinking that reference, and he just, and I think he even admitted later, maybe even the people in the car, he just is like, I'm just gonna go full speed and try to go around this guy. And so when I looked back again, he was like fishtailing or something. I was like, holy shit. And I was like, I'm not even going to try to get over to the shoulder. I was hit in China when I was on the shoulder, actually head on. I was like, I'm just going to get off this friggin' road, And so I pulled off, and I'd go on, the road was a little elevated, right? It's like a meter high, like let's say 3 feet high or a couple of feet high. And so I remember because I was going down on maybe the stones or whatever, completely off the road. But because he fishtailed and lost control, maybe because he was trying to go around me and there was that other car coming. But either way, it could have been bad because there definitely was another car coming in the other direction. And it was like, shit, he just hit the back of my tire. And so I'd flung around, landed in the ditch. I had a huge goosebump on my forehead. My entire body was sore. It felt like everything was sprained. Luckily, nothing was broken. Obviously, that bike was totaled. And, he basically was in the field next to me, I don't know, 100 feet away or whatever. And, from everyone in the car and from everyone who saw, everyone was on my side. They're like, yeah, the guy was fucking just speeding like crazy. And totally should have slowed down or gone around me and whatnot. And he didn't beep either. There was definitely no beeping, so I don't think his horn worked. This country's poor. It's not like this guy's, I'm sure his car was made in the Soviet Union 40 years ago, Probably didn't have anything that could pass by any regulations in the States or anywhere else. So anyway, of course, he's frustrated because I could tell too. Because he's mentioning oh well, because I had headphones on. It's all my fault. I was like, well, you didn't have your horn, and I'd look back, and you'd still were coming, at least 100, if not more, kilometers an hour. And long story short, another basically taxi came. So he was already taking a couple people, or maybe 3, and so now all of us are in the other taxi. So I guess maybe he was in the front seat, and I was with 2 other people in the back seat. And it's not even a marked car. It's basically just looks like a private car, basically a 4-door car or whatever. And so we basically went to Bishkek in that car. They threw my bike and all my stuff in the back. And then we went it must have been 3 or 4 hours to Bishkek. I know we went through a tunnel, which actually, I was glad I didn't bike through that tunnel. I think it's 10 or 20 kilometers of no ventilation or something like that. Maybe not that long, but anyway. And so we stopped, I guess, in the suburbs before Bishkek, and the other passengers either continued or I got off. So I'm alone with this guy who, regardless, he's guilty because you hit a pedestrian, and he'd have to buy my bike, which I think new is probably about $750. I think I was going to try to get like 400 or 500 from him. And we can't converse at all. You know, no one knows English. In this country, everyone obviously speaks the local Kyrgyz language and Russian. And obviously I don't know either of those. And so I waited a bit, and like it was already getting dark by this point. And from what my understanding was, I guess maybe there was one girl either with us or someone did very basic translation of like, we're going to see the translator, is what I understood. You know, this is before the smartphone, so you couldn't easily translate stuff. And so, yeah, this guy came and picked us up. And so, just give you a little bit of a description of the driver. The guy who hit me was like, I don't know, average size kind of guy, maybe like, you know, you could say like 5'7", I don't know, 150 pounds. So it wasn't a big guy or anything. The dude who picked us up looked straight up like a big, huge mafia wrestler, dude. Like, and they were both not happy. You know, they both look super pissed off, super serious. Obviously, his car was messed up because he had to leave his car back in that field. Someone was probably going to have to go and tow it and repair it. So that was going to cost him, you know, hundreds of more dollars. And then he was going to have to pay me like, at least, I don't know, a few $100s. And so I get in this car with these guys and I'm like, man, dude, this is so sketchy. Like, is he going to spend $500 to get a bike for me? Or is he just going to spend $1 and put a bullet in the back of my head? You know, because we were driving down in the dark in the middle of nowhere. And I'm like, oh, I'm sure the translator's down in the middle of nowhere, right? In this dark road. And so I'm actually like, you know, sitting in the back seat, thinking like, man, like I might have to get out and run. And I barely couldn't. I mean, it was basically like everything felt like it was sprained or almost broken. And so, yeah, my like survival mentality was going in. I'm like, dude, I might have to fucking run or something. And so we finally get to this house, or it might have even been an apartment. And we go in and I was like, oh boy, here's the end. And they open the door and it's like some old Russian lady who like was an English teacher. So they actually brought me to a translator. And yeah, she translated, we negotiated. And of course I didn't get the $500. I think I got about 300. And then the guy ended up taking me back to, he tried taking me to like the Hyatt at first, which was about $200 in Bishkek. I was like, no, I need to go something a little cheaper. And so they called around and I got to like the cheapest hotel. I think it was about $7. And it was, like right in the morning, because I don't think that night I probably just passed out. You know, I was already, you know, super tired and everything. And I went to go through my stuff in the morning. And in the summer in Bishkek, a lot of these areas, you know, there's houseflies everywhere. And there was already a lot of houseflies. And I grabbed my stuff and I was like, shit. I was just in a world of Winnie the Pooh. The day before the accident, on the side of the road in Kyrgyzstan, you know, a lot of people are selling different things. So mostly like bread and honey. And I couldn't get like a small one. I had to get like a 2-liter thing of honey. Because I was buying this bread all the time, snack on, and it's plain. And I was like, all right, they got honey everywhere. I'll pour a little honey on some of the bread or some of my food, support the local business. And that was like hit on impact. It was in my pannier. And so fucking all of my shit and everything I owned was just in like 3 pounds of honey. So yeah, that sucked. The first thing I had to do is I could barely even move. And then I had to clean all the honey off everything I owned. And then later on, basically, you know, I stayed in Bishkek for at least a week or two. There was actually a Russian guy that had a small shop out of his house, and I bought another bike for about $400. And I continued on the journey. But yeah, pretty crazy story. You know, you got to be careful out there. You know, you really got to pay attention of other things too, not just like a car that might hit you. You know, even big trucks, when they take a right turn, if someone takes a right turn right in front of you, if you see a truck doing that, although they didn't hit you in the front of that truck, the rear wheels cut in closer. And I remember one time when you know, the guy came around me and I'm thinking, I was like, dude, those back wheels. And I went, you know, I pulled my bike back in reverse and those rear tires sure as hell went right exactly where I was sitting, like at a traffic light or something. So you really got to pay attention out there. But anyway, that trip was cool in Kyrgyzstan. Awesome country, you know, good food. And nice people. There's not that many services outside the big cities. So like when you get small towns, like there might be just one restaurant or one hotel in a village. It's not very commercialized like China or Southeast Asia. So keep that in mind if you go there. There could be some pretty long distances where there's not like too many restaurants and things like that. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the story. I've got a few other ones on some of my accidents. I almost drowned. I got hit by the car. I just finished a video on getting impaled by bamboo. But when you do 25 years of crazy adventures, like every 5 or 10 years, you could lose your life, right? So it's just part of the territory. So guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see more content. My channel has a lot of different stuff from my travels around the world, whether hiking or biking, and some of the things over the years I've done, whether I was in the military, commercial fishing in Alaska, or my experience living in China and Taiwan for 15 years, and I was a teacher there and led tours and did all kinds of stuff. So if that stuff's beneficial for you or entertaining, subscribe, and I hope to see you next time. Cheers.